All right. In this video, we're going to be talking about the setting up of the Levridge AgXML integration using Dynamics 365, Finance and Operations, and using a server to kind of receive the messages and also import messages. So we are starting off by first demoing the setup. There will be subsequent videos kind of showing the actual use of the functionality later. So currently I'm in it's called Bezier environment, Dynamics 365 Finance and Operations. Okay, and the first step we need to go is go down to System Administration, Setup, Business Events, Business Catalog, Business Parameters. The other place we will be in here is in the Event Frameworks Endpoint Definitions. In fact, I'm going to go to the endpoint definition first. So if I click on the endpoint definition, you will see I have an endpoint set up. These are relatively easy to set up, and you can kind of name them however you want. Right now, we have the endpoint called export XML with the description exporting to AgXML. This is really the key piece of information right here is your service bus endpoint. If you are using Azure, this is what will be given to you, and you can pull from your Azure portal that gives you your endpoint to use during the integration. You would come in here and place it in this value. You then assign a topic or queue name, which is done in the service bus, which I will show you a little later. So just kind of remember the AgXML export queue name and what it looks like. And again, it's set up currently as a topic. It could also be set up as a queue. We currently, for the most part, use topic for our integrations. So if I come back to our system administration and our business event catalogs, okay, you'll notice there's quite a few different business event categories for different modules. What makes us unique is for Levridge, we created these 10 right here, Levridge Core and Levridge Commodity. Levridge Commodity deals specifically with creating, modifying, deletions of a load. And then the other Levridge Core is around the scale tickets, so the creation, modification, the farm field modifications, any transportation details, and the deletion or void of that ticket. These are created by Levridge specifically, as well as we get further down on the endpoints, we have additional details. So I will kind of walk you through setting this up so far in the system, and then we'll go in and take a look at the server, what needs to be set up on the AgXML export and import process. This is specifically for exporting out of the system. So if I go to endpoints, you'll notice I currently have one called Levridge. So I'm going to create a new one just for our demo. And if I click new under config new endpoint, out of the box Dynamics, you have these, what was it, 6. We created this one called Levridge Exchange. So if you're using AgXML right now, you would need to use the Levridge Exchange endpoint type. Okay, you go ahead and hit next, and you would define it, right? So we could call this demo Levridge. Same thing, just kind of give a description. Add another word, and then the endpoint definition. So kind of what we talked about earlier, the export AgXML definition that I showed, you would select here. And that, again, is set up using your Azure portal value. So we will see this again later as we get into the service bus, but once you've got that set up, you go ahead and hit OK. Perfect. There's our demo Levridge endpoint name. Now, to actually add what events you want to add to be active on this integration, you come back to Business Event Catalog and you select the values. Let's say I'm going to use all of them. I assume you would use all of them. Select them, click Activate, pick the legal entity for which you want it, Levridge, and your endpoint name, Demo Levridge. I'll go ahead and hit OK. Now, if I go over, you'll notice the business data event catalogs are here as well. We will not be dealing with these right now in this demo. Our endpoint is still there, our demo Levridge, and now we can see our active business events are now basically doubled because we have our Levridge one set up, but then we now have our demo Levridge, which is essentially a copy of the Levridge. But you can see all of those demo Levridge ones that are active. So let me filter these out. If we decided we don't need these anymore, you have a couple different options. You can just deactivate them. Okay, now they are completely out of the list. and put into this other list called inactive business events, which you can see here. And then you also have errors, assuming you had errors in this. So that is the setup of this integration in the system. So I'm going to go ahead and actually activate these again and show that they're back in here. So that is the basic setup on the Dynamics 365 Finance and Operations side. Now we're going to go into our server and kind of walk through what's needed to be set up there. So I'm now showing my server called LevPavo, which is kind of where we have the integration pointed to currently. So the first thing you'll want to do, and this would be done during setup, is go into our Levridge folder. Right now we have a Levridge integration host folder, which is specifically for inbound AgXML, and the Levridge integration host outbound. As far as what I just showed in Dynamics 365 was specifically for outbound, there's really not any setup needed on the inbound side in Dynamics. That happens via the code in the integration. So on our outbound, right, I'm going to go ahead and open up our outbound since we're still dealing with outbound. And you'll notice we have an app setting folder. This is the really critical folder, or excuse me, file that is a JSON file that we need to look at. So if I open up our app setting file, this is a lot of information in here, and we're not going to go through everything in here today, but just kind of some of the key points of here when you're looking at the integration. So these two sections right here are really important. We have the system integration source config and the target config. So the source config is where is the data coming from? Target config, where is the data going? So right now we have our service bus config name is commodity transfer export. Our OData configure name is called Bezier. These are defined in the actual file we're looking at here. And the system name is Dynamics AX. So we know that we call it Dynamics AX, but down here later in the file is where you kind of see, right, that the different setups based on the endpoint. So you'll see our endpoint that we mentioned earlier. You'll see the topic name that we mentioned earlier that is being used. So if I scroll back up, right, and we see our OData config name is called Bezier. Here's our OData config name. This is our Dynamics environment being used for this in the source config. So it's coming from Dynamics. Our target config is AgXML. So if we look at the AgXML, it's really just a file path to the C drive to a folder, a temp folder called AgXML-2A. So these are the key critical things. This is telling you where it's coming from and where it's going. So now if I back out of here, and I'm actually going to close this. We'll open it up again for inbound, and I will open up our folder, and you'll see that I have the C drive temp AgXML-2A. So that's essentially the setup for the outbound. The only other thing for the outbound, which is also needed for the inbound, is under services. We have to make sure our Levridge integration host service and our Levridge integration host outbound service, what they're called right now, are running to have the integration running. So if I come back out, as far as the inbound process side, very similar. Like I said, there's not really anything in D365 Finance Operations you need to work with, but you still need to go to the Levridge folder and just validate that our Levridge integration host, which is our inbound, and then our app setting folder. I will open that up. And same thing, our system integration source config. Now you will notice it is coming from the AgXML, and our target config is going to Bezier Dynamics AX. So same type of thing, we have a folder called AgXML, which is consuming the message and sends it into Dynamics 365. It's very similar setup as the other file. It just holds basically your Bezier, your Azure endpoint information, and where you want to point it towards. Okay, and the other piece, again, the services is turned on. So now from here, we will go ahead and end this recording and pick up on another recording as far as actually demoing the functionality. Thank you.